This is Scott Fain with the Youngstown Lifestyle Podcast, where I take the time to learn about the people and opportunities in the Youngstown, Ohio community. Today's guest is Jeff Seal. While not a Youngstown resident, he is Executive Vice President of Revolver Finance. He took a few minutes from his busy schedule to share some information about his company's goals, his passion for helping clients fund deals, and how anyone can use quality financing to create new opportunities in real estate. So without further ado, let's start the show.
This is Scott Fain with the Youngstown Lifestyle Podcast, and my guest today is Jeff Seal from Revolver Finance. How are you doing today, Jeff?
I'm good, Scott. Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to get into it with you. We got introduced. My partner had spoken with you, and you guys have been playing a little bit of an email tag going back and forth. And all of the emails that I was reading over had a lot of good information as far as like what your company does. And I wanted to start right there. How would you best describe Revolver Finance and its mission?
No, absolutely. So it's very much hard or private money, depending on what definition you like better. And so everything that we do is loans specific to business entities, specifically real estate investors, for short-term interest-only loans for purchase and rehab of properties. And that is in 45 states.
Okay. How long have you been with them?
We started this company about 2.5 years ago. I've been in the industry as a whole for about 6 years now. Prior to that, it was a lot of what I did was on the default servicing side of the industry, so that goes for about 12 years.
When you say default servicing, what does that mean?
So I worked for a number of different auction firms. So everything that we did were during the REO boom, as properties were coming into the banks would utilize auction firms for kind of an overflow valve. And so we were auctioning property off, and one of the things we noticed through that industry is that the ability to inject capital or financing into auction scenarios is quite difficult. And so we myself and my partners kind of made it a mission, like how can we inject ourselves into those spaces? And while doing that, we also had a lot of residual business that came through just typical retail type of channels. And so not only do we have an auction platform or an auction financing platform, we also just have your standard short-term fix and flip, which just inevitably ended up taking over most of our time because we had so much business flowing from that, which is a good thing. But that's to answer your question, that's kind of what I mean by the default servicing side.
Okay. So as far as just with Revolver, it sounds like you guys are very passionate about what you put together. What's your passion as it relates to investing in finance? Like, what's your greatest passion with it?
Specific to, it's hard not to love real estate. There's only so much terra firma out there. It almost feels like a commodity, and having the ability to repurpose it, I think is just a beautiful thing in and of itself. I've never been one that loves, the suburbs, and lack of a better way to put it, cookie cutter type of scenarios. I love going right in the heart of downtown areas, finding those 1920s craftsman style bungalows, and rehabbing those. And I find it just fascinating. Every home has its own eclectic look to it, or every neighborhood has its own eclectic look to it. And I just like that. The creativity that comes with that, I think, is so much more impressive than the cookie cutter neighborhoods on the outskirts. And so it's always fun to witness, though my hands aren't getting dirty, it's always fun to witness through the appraisals and the inspections throughout the process of what they look like when they buy it, and to the end result when it actually hits the market. That's definitely the most fascinating part of my job.
And that is a fascinating part. My sister and I fell in love with, I come from Cleveland, so a lot of those older neighborhoods down in East Cleveland, stuff like that, you see some of the architecture in the buildings, and it is really interesting how people used to build and how they build now, and if you can bring some of that back, some of that, how they don't build things like they used to. I love that type of thing. Now, one of the things I like to find out is, we like to network, we like to give business where we can, give referrals where we can. So if I'm out and about, how do I know that I'm meeting with an ideal client for you in Revolver Finance? Like, tell me about that, who that person is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we try to, there's a product for every level, right? So I want to be clear. If you are a brand new investor, if you're just trying to get into it, there is a product for you. It's not a banner rate and leverage scenario. It's a get your feet wet. You put in a little bit more skin for me to get comfortable. Let's figure this out together. Once we see some success in one or two transactions, then we can bump you up into the higher leverage scenario. So, that might be an 80 or 85% of total cost leverage on that type of deal. If you have done 2 transactions in the past 2 years, that in the industry is kind of a standard from a quote unquote experience scenario. That'll get you 90% of total cost coverage across the transaction, and a little bit better rate as well. And so, to answer your question, there's never a bad person to work with. We can usually overcome that. It's really, there's just bad projects, right? So, we'll get into that. And once we figure out from an appraisal standpoint, or valuation, or an inspection, something like that, if the project's bad, we'll talk about that, and we'll either lower the leverage, which then shows me that you as an investor are that much more willing to do the deal. Great, we'll still do it. Or we walk away together, and we'll move on to another one.
Okay, so it sounds like you have there's a level of entry for just about any level of experience. If you haven't done it before, then you have a plan for it, et cetera.
That is correct. Yeah. So we're not looking at debt to income ratios or personal financial statements or anything like that. If you bring us a transaction, if the numbers work on that transaction, if the exit strategy is solid, and if you have the cash to close that transaction, we're most likely going to put a deal together.
Okay. I wanted to just give you an opportunity. You had outlined very briefly the other day to me a program that I liked where you were talking a little bit about just I think I was at the 90%. I just wanted to, if you can kind of give the people listening a recap of what a simple program looks like. We find a deal, this is what it's going to look like. This is the process. Just kind of nutshell it for me, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so, and everyone does it a little bit differently. I think what's important to understand is it's like shopping for cell phone companies, right? It's really hard to compare apples to apples because everyone has their own little way of quoting. Everyone has their own little way of leveraging the property. But what we do is a 90% of total cost loan. Okay. There's companies that do 85-100s. There's some that do 90-100s. Those actually use a little bit more of an as-is formula, which actually it doesn't look as pretty once you get into it, but it looks really good advertising 90-100. But we do a 90% of total cost, so 90% of the purchase and 90% of the rehab. So if you're buying a property for $50,000 and you're going to put $50,000 in rehab, and your in value is going to be $160,000 when you're done, that loan, given that I'm going to bring 90%, I'm going to bring $90,000 on that transaction. And you, the investor, a borrower, are going to bring $10,000 in that transaction. All right. And then your $10,000 will immediately go to the purchase amount of that property, and then the construction budget will then be created at 100%, put into a holdback account, and you draw upon that on completions. You can do as many draws as you like. That is completely up to you, and how much cash flow you need. That's up to you and your general contractor. But it's done on work completed, and that's usually a 3 to 4 day process from time of request of money to the wire that hits your account.
Okay. And so that's, you say, completed upon so basically you do the repairs, then you get the money right back.
Yes, sir. It's all complete. So everything, and a lot of that is we operate in 45 states, and so we have a very vast reach. We can't drive by the property and just verify it ourselves. So we have a third-party inspector that goes out and has the original budget and sees that, okay, he has completed 100% of the demo and 50% of his sheetrock is done. He sends that back to us, and we'll pay out 100% of the demo line item, and we'll pay out 50% of the drywall line item. And so you can, again, we have some investors that do it twice, and we have some investors that do it every single week, whatever it takes to kind of keep you moving forward.
Okay. Well, I will definitely have all of your information on our site and definitely on this podcast. Before we go, I wanted to ask you one more question. I like to go random, but I'm trying to focus on what's important as far as in my random question. So what's one way that you use to create balance between your work and home life?
Oh my gosh, that took a long time to figure out. I don't know if I've quite nailed it yet. It's easy to drag work life into home life when you are somewhat passionate about it, because real estate is all around you, right? It's hard not to drive by a property and think what you could do to that, or drive by a property and think what has been done to that, no matter the hours of the day that you do that. And so, the best thing I can do is really try to structure and time block my day. And so if my day always has a time block type of look to it, that means that my afternoons and evenings also have kind of a time block to it. So it's taken years to do it, but I try to be pretty pretty focused throughout the day to hit it hard, no messing around. But when that quitting time rolls around, you got to sign off. It's hard to do that when you're in a business development role, but the more responsive and quick to turn calls in the middle of the day you are, the less likely you're going to get those late afternoon calls. And so it is very difficult. I've hit a point in my life now where text messaging is not exciting anymore. I never get friends that are texting me. It's always work, and but I do, it has pushed me away from the electronic devices a little bit over the weekend, because it'll suck you back in, and there's nothing more important than family and taking that I guess you want to call it day of Sabbath, right? You've got to step out and you have to do that, because otherwise I'm worthless on Monday. And so I think it's important to be passionate about something. You've got to feel, and you've got to show people, right? And you can't do that if you come in and you're just dragging tail every Monday. And so taking those days and that time to rejuvenate just enlightens the next week that much more.
Well, that is a very good answer. It actually reminds me of, I think Brian Tracy says something similar to that when it comes to time blocking and, planning your work time, planning your play time, and sticking to that schedule. So, and I too have a very hard time with that. It's not like I have it all figured out, but that's one of the things I'm working on right now is my time blocking. So,
oh yeah,
I appreciate you blocking the time with me today.
No, absolutely. No, you're absolutely. It's like life, man. It's a daily struggle. I'll get it right some days. Other days I'll fail epically, but there's a goal in mind. So
right, yes, indeed. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on here. I'll definitely put all the information in the podcast notes and on the website so that people can find you and locate to you at Revolver Finance. But thank you again.
No, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.